That's all right.
Hey, welcome to the Cam and Otis Show. This episode, fellow Green Beret and entrepreneur Jason McCarthy joining us. Going to have some great discussions. Gonna try and stay in the business realm, but if you've listened to the show a time or two, and you know when I have a fellow member of the regiment on, it yeah, you gotta watch us because we'll run down them war story rabbit holes and yeah, it'll be like we're back in the team room and not even realizing there's other people in the room, sort of thing. But hey, Jason, man, great to see you and great to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me, brother.
Yeah, man. Hey, so I just gotta ask and see if it's the same reason I'm thinking. But rucksacks, what was it, man, that drew you to the rucksacks? Because I'll just let everybody in on a little secret. That I've got a rucksack problem. I've got a stack of them downstairs. So I'm just curious.
I mean, look, I'm such an accidental entrepreneur. It's not something that I plan to do or whatever. I got bit by the service bug after 9/11. I didn't know. I started the journey with the revenge bug, and I got, it morphed and evolved into a desire to serve. And I thought that was going to be and remain my path. And, I didn't understand what rucking was before I joined up. I had no idea, right? I thought, like everybody else, that special forces training was about, flutter kicks in the middle of the night and eating dirt in the river and all that stuff. And then there's a little bit of that, I get it, but that's the easy stuff, right?
Yeah.
For the real professionals, that's the easy stuff. And rucking is the foundation of special forces training. And so as I was getting out, I didn't plan on, hey, a rucking company, or hey, this is going to be a fitness activity or whatever. This is going to be social and can bring people together, and it doesn't have to suck like it did in the Army, right? And I just kind of had some old assault packs, and I was designing something for my wife. She was a case officer for the CIA and in West Africa. And so I just designed a go bag for her. And then I was like, all right, well, there were some problems with the signature of the rucks that we were using. I was like, all right, well, I'll just design my own. How hard can it be? And, famous last words, right? And so, and still in that process,
Can it be?
yeah, and in that process, I wasn't as methodical on this is a plan and this is my plan. I was just defaulting to what I knew. And so for that, I am forever grateful to the guys in our community and to the regiment and to, everything that's represented to me in my life. And my goal now is to pay that forward to others.
That's awesome. And yeah, you said several things there, and it's I'll just revert back to Tony Robbins thing about word associations. I mean, that's broader than Tony, but I was just recent thing I was talking about. And, I still have not gotten over that of the, it's ruck up. And even when I go out hunting, in that mindset of what people are doing that for fitness and fun. I mean, it's ingrained in my mind still in a different form.
I hear you, man. And I kind of broke myself of that one day at a time because there was serving a higher purpose. But even with hunting, right? Like there's a great book that came out recently called The Comfort Crisis, written by a buddy. He did a caribou hunt up in Alaska. And, we got in touch. He'd been writing about some form of rucking and human performance for a while. But in order to train to go do that, you need to ruck. If say you live in Florida where I do, and you're going to go, quarter an elk or whatever and haul it off the mountain. I mean, how are you going to train for that? Go for a jog. I mean, that's not what it's about. You got to be able to carry heavy weight long distances. And so your body, my body, it comes naturally to us. You just got to kind of maintain the machine a little bit at that point. You don't have to dig fighting positions and stay up all night and, base security and all this shit, right? Like it can be okay. Go outside 30 pounds, probably 45 pounds, do it for an hour, breathe in some free ass American air and soak in some vitamin D and sweat a little bit and have a good time. Bring a buddy along for more fun.
No, it is so much better, I mean, all joking aside, it is better for your body than all the other, back in the days of like the ankle weights and all this crazy stuff that we used to do. I mean, you throw
Yeah,
that
Body
extra.
by Jane Fonda. I want no piece of that, right? I
No.
want no piece of Jane Fonda, and I want no piece of that, body by with ankle weights and all that jazzercise
Mhm.
stuff. No thanks. Ruck up, brother.
That's
Ruck
right.
up.
That's right. Well, and you touched on something else that I think is it's unique to the veteran community, but I think it's more unique to our regiment, and that's well, I just started doing this, and then this happened, and then this happened. That it truly is, I believe, that unconventional mindset that we got ingrained into us of well, how do you solve that? Well, what about this? And you just kind of you follow that path of what happens next. And I'm curious if you have that same sort of feeling, if you thought about it that way. Is that where it
Well,
came
so
from?
I think what has not been explained adequately since 9/11, special forces has come to mean everything from Rangers to Green Berets to SEALs to Delta to MARSOC to you name it. And there is a through line to every person who serves in those communities. And God bless them. I work with all people from all those units at GORuck, right? In our mission of building better Americans by getting out and whooping it on at events and rucking and you name it. Um, the part that's unique to the Green Berets, that is a cherished part of our story, is, to me, starting with the Mountain Yards in Vietnam. And one of my mentors was a MACV-SAW guy. He works with me every day at GORuck, right? 2 tours plus the fall of Saigon. And that was his introduction, started out with the Legion, 5th Special Forces Group. And, he just got these stories of brotherhood with the Montagnards. I mean, as much or more so than he did with his fellow Green Berets, right? I mean, six person teams. You're going out, there's 2 Americans and 4 Montagnards, right? And you're seeing that in the war on terror as well. I mean, it wasn't Green Berets moving into the boneyard of the Soviet Empire and saying, we're going to put more helicopters and more lead to skull, right? It was, we're going to link up with a partner force. We are going to then force multiply and achieve our mission success by working by, with, and through our partner force. And that's another thing that took me years and years to realize that that's what I was doing. And so, that just came naturally to me in a way that, looking at some of the other services, that's just not the mission in the other places. It's not what they do. And so this is a unique role that the Green Berets play culturally and just who we are. And so that's a fantastic way, number one, to win a war, because when we do the AAR on both Vietnam and Iraq and Afghanistan, we're going to say the best, most lasting impacts involved soft, right? Like, yes, you need your door kickers to go in and go after your true high value targets. But really what it is the most successful parts are working with the guys on the ground who are there, right? And developing those bonds and way force multiplying way beyond what you can do unilaterally. And so in business, it's kind of like a war of limited resources at all times. I mean, so is war, but business is just not life or death to the same extent. And so that's exactly what we've done at GORuck. And like I said, it took me a while to realize this, but when nobody wanted to buy the gear because it's really expensive and we build it in America, right? I mean, you're like, wait, what? I mean, I can tell you why all those bags that you see at Target suck. Number one, there's 10 trillion of them in the landfill somewhere, right? And yours will be there next year too. And ours aren't, and they won't be. But besides that, right, it's like when nobody wanted to buy it, we said, hey, we got to go back to, I got to do something else here. And I had to do it fast. I had no money, right? I had no resources. I had nothing. And it's like, all right, well, I'll come up with an event called the GORuck Challenge. And I'll show up on a random place or a predetermined place, but not like a big event. Just, hey, 20 people, 30 people, you want to show up, I'll give you a day in the life of wearing my boots, right? In special forces training. And what happened was it was kind of just empowering people. Hey, this is what you can do when you work together. Hey, it's going to suck, but it's worth it. The beers at the end are awesome, stuff like that. And then people met people, and that's how a real community was formed. Not not like a Facebook community, which is, by the way, not a community, or not like these other places that want a piece of that word community, but a real community. And that is, historically, communities were tribes, and you would share food and you would share defense. And there's too little of that stuff going on. There's too little sharing going on in general, but there's definitely too little of it, this day and age. And so it has to happen in the real world. And that happened. And that just became our kind of local ruck clubs. And those people would organize, community led. They would organize people in their areas. And every once in a while we would send a special forces guy out to run another event. And there's a kind of a natural, hey, we'll check in with the leaders in the community and do all that. And got to the point where we're running 1,000 events led by soft dudes. And there's 500 ruck clubs around the country and around the world. And that's a testament to the guys who came in that also just inherently knew that system. Like Mocha Mike, old first grouper, knows that. He's a Green Beret. This is what he did. Dan Plants is a active duty sergeant major. Now he's at SFAS, right? He's at third group for 13 years. First mission was Shock Valley. He came on very early into GORuck. And, these guys put their names and their reputations on the line because they believed in what we were doing at GORuck. And, without them, this just would not exist. And the reason why it worked, I believe, or is working still, is because we're just following the blueprint of what we know. And, if you're Hemingway, you listen to Hemingway, it's like, write what you know. And we're doing what we know. And it's a real honor and a privilege to get to do that.
I think that's a really interesting thing, talking about doing what you know, because it's all about seeing those opportunities ahead of time. I think that's something we've talked about a bunch on the show, that there's this difference in mindset that you find with specifically Green Berets, but even other special operators, of kind of seeing a big picture and following things a little bit more naturally, to where other people aren't seeing that big picture and aren't working towards those kind of goals. And I could see, once you got it going, how, like you said, you're an accidental entrepreneur, how you kind of went with the flow, just saw the opportunities in front of you and kept connecting people, kept growing it that way. What was the initial spark that drove you to that first ruck with that first 20, 30 people?
Desperation. I had a bunch of my apartment was full of rucks that I'd spent 2.5 years designing, developing, and getting manufactured. Complete pain in the ass, right? And then nobody wanted to buy them. And I did a countrywide tour with my dog. We drove around to 48 states and met people and got into adventures and tried to sell some of our rucks at retail shops and you name it, the old fashioned way, show up and shake someone's hand and smile a little bit, tell them your story, tell them what's up. And, I was a really shitty salesman. And so what it turned out to be was I was impatient, first off, but I didn't have any money. And I was in business school, and I just had to make this either work or my heart was just going to lead me back to go serve America and go back into the Army, or, go to the agency where my wife was, or whatever that case may be. And so it was just sort of, I thought it was going to be a marketing thing. Like, hey, I can show up and take pictures. I would take thousands of pictures at one of these events because I didn't have enough confidence in taking pictures, and I didn't really, I could look at pictures and say, I hate that and I like that, right? But I didn't know how to take them really. And so I'm taking so many pictures, and I would spend the entire day afterwards, in this just fog of exhaustion and processing all the pictures, and then trying to get the pictures out and show what we're doing and really show the gear in use. And what happened though was it was such a productive thing, a valuable thing for me and for the participants, me in giving back, right? And them in kind of learning from a guy that was in special forces about what that's like. And it became more about the people than the things that they were wearing. So that became what the GORuck brand was. And then we had these strong brand advocates who were out there. We weren't paying them or anything. They would pay me to come give them a guided tour under a rock and a log, and do this PT and learn these lessons. And it just then they became just evangelists, and it was and is still just an honor and a privilege.
I think there's an interesting thing there, and it's the community versus business. and I've seen it, and I've seen it work both ways, and I've heard of it in both respect. If you were to redesign it, would you start building the community first, or would you start the business first? In an ideal, knowing what you know, hindsight thing.
Well, I mean, I spent 2.5 years building
Mhm.
what has become an iconic rucksack, GR1.
Yeah.
I mean, we've made basically no material changes to it, no significant changes to it, a decade plus later, and it's in our top sellers. And, I mean, so the point is that there was this scalable thing, this business model, if you will, that was built before I got to the community. All that was done in the shadows, though, right? And so there was something there, but there wasn't a real business. And basically, the meat of your question, or the meat of my answer to your question, will be, here is the wrong answer. The wrong answer is 10 years later, you're going to hire a community person to build your community. It definitely doesn't work like that. Yeah. Absolutely, under no circumstances can you do that. It has to be a cultural thing. And so if you care about people and you're willing to sacrifice for them and put them first, regardless of what your other objectives are, financial or invented or whatever, other games you're playing in your mind, if you're solving problems for people and providing a real service with real value to them, and you have this kind of back and forth communication with people that's not just transactional, then you have the opportunity to build a real community. And if you build a real community, that has to also involve something that's not you. You can't be the only person in the center of your community. Yes, community needs leaders, but a community. You want to build kind of a community of communities of sorts, right? Mm-hmm. And that means you need local people around, and they need to be able to do some of your bidding for you. So it's not, as I always laugh when I see these kind of places trying to build communities after the fact, and it's just kind of doesn't work that way. So for me, it's like, yes, you need, the business has to incorporate community, unless you're going to be a transactional business. If you're selling widgets and all you're going to do is sell to, big box retail ABC, then the community that you're a part of is, you have to deal with sales reps and whatever. If you've got an open door, or you're open for business wherever, or you need referrals, or you need something like that, you want word of mouth stuff. I mean, there's all different ways to kind of define community, I guess, but it has to be part of who you are and your ethos and how you culturally operate your business.
Yeah, that's great. I just got to throw something else on, Cam, before we go too far down the road, because what you were talking about earlier, I thought, what came to mind is Sarah Blakely and Spanx. So if you know Sarah Blakely's story, and I've heard it a couple of times at some events and things like that, she did the opposite of what you did. She was that salesperson that went into every retail shop. So I find it really interesting that I think the lesson there is that it doesn't matter the path. What you find the path that works best for you. And she found the path that worked best for her, which was be a persistent salesperson, standing in the store and stuff like that. And you're like, no, that's not the path. I build communities by, with, and through is the path that I do. So I just think I just got to throw that out there as kind of a perspective on.
What was she selling?
Spanx, the women's like underwear thing that's
tights.
Your wife will know.
Tights and stuff.
Yeah, your wife, I guarantee your wife will know what that is.
Would you describe it as a community, though?
No. Well, now it is. Now it is. She didn't do that. She was a hard salesman standing in the retail store, doing the exact.
But it's not
opposite.
like they're. I mean, is it a real world thing, or is it sort of there's a big Facebook group and an Instagram following?
Oh, no. Well, I really don't know about that.
Not remotely the kind of community that we're talking about with regards to GORuck.
So that's my point. Like, total respect in building and scaling a business that stands for something more than just the lowest cost provider with no meaning behind it. There's not. I mean, you can play that game. That's fighting fair. and I don't like to fight fair. I like to build a brand and kind of make it about more. Just the word community is thrown around so much that it's just, to me, it's kind of like, how do we define those terms before we really get into them? Because yes, you can mean something more than being a widget, but to me, a community happens in the real world. If it's not in the real world, it's a forum. And a forum is completely different. Following someone on social media, that's not a community. That's a, social isn't media to me.
I'm really curious, when you were talking about with the GORuck community and not, knowing that you needed to step back to some extent and not being that figurehead, is that something that came a little bit natural? Because I think when you're doing something with a business, people always want the founder to be up there and all the pictures and all this kind of stuff. But also, I haven't talked with several different Green Berets now. I also know that tends to not come too naturally to y'all. So how did that go? Were people pushing you to be that figurehead?
Well, I was very reluctant out of the gates. I mean, I still wanted to go. I mean, like, so my wife was in the CIA. That was my path. I was going to go that route. And so, I started the company publicly with a pseudonym. I mean, all that. I was in that mindset, And at one point, it was either I've got to make this about a story, or this just isn't going to work. And to give it it's like you almost got to burn the boats a little bit, right? And so it did not come naturally. But there was kind of an acceptance that if I do this the right way, then the regiment, which has always been a very important thing to me, even though, Green Berets are not the only people buying our stuff. It's a very, very small percentage, just because our community's small. But that kind of acceptance and tolerance and support meant everything to me, and still does. And I'm not willing to trade that in for additional sales by, prostituting myself out or my story out. And so, at some point, it just became how you deliver your story. And I think ultimately you can sniff out the guy that's making something all about them. Like, you do have to be a face, a figurehead. And I still am that within our community. I mean, I put out a report every year that kind of details, this is where the business is, and this is what's going on, and all that kind of stuff. And I'm accessible online to a lot of the people, many of whom have been in a class that I've led or have been at some of their events, many of whom have not, though. And so, it's a very fine line. I think it goes back to kind of, your intent and how you deliver those messages, how that's received, both kind of publicly to the masses and then privately within the team rooms all over the country, and at some of the FOBs around the world, and both of those matter greatly to me.
Right. It's like you got, sometimes you got to be the guy in all the pictures and that kind of stuff. But if you're bringing that same persona to your team, then that's a much bigger problem. So I think that's a great point there.
You're exactly right. I never thought about it exactly like that. Right. I mean, there's a time like when you have your detachment commander. I mean, this is my background, right? And I think a lot of the guys would share this. And it's a first name basis, right? Mine was Walt. It was, Walt, and I'm Jason, and that's what we called each other. I was the lowest guy on the team, and he was the 18 Alpha. And you also know when General Petraeus visits your fire base, which he did, and it's like Walt is now Sir or Captain Cooper or whatever the case may be, and you kind of know your situational awareness. And it's one of those things where there are times when I've got to do something, or I've got to go meet the person, the partner. I've got to go do things that are my job for our company. But yeah, if I come back and I act like I'm so important, I mean, like I'm out here in front of GORuck Scars, which is our kind of R&D repair center. Tomorrow morning, it's Friday morning, it's 6:30, and I'll be out there, pushing sandbags and rucking around for 45 minutes or an hour with anybody else that shows up, and building the camaraderie, like doing the same work together, and that you can't do that all the time, just like you can on the team. Everybody's got their role, and everybody knows that that's the case. And you respect that about someone's role. Like, sir, go get us the goddamn missions, like I'll unload, make sure the gun trucks are ready to go. You go get us the mission. How does that sound? And, that's kind of what it's like. And at the end of the day, you're going to break bread with someone, you're going to sit kneecap to kneecap. Lessons that I learned are, if you're in charge, you eat last, right? Sometimes that means you're passing out beers to everybody else first as well. And there's just the little things like that make you a better servant leader. And those are the qualities that I learned and I'm always trying to improve upon.
So staying in that realm of the thing that you learned, what's one nugget, and you can make it Green Beret specific or just military specific, one nugget lesson learned in service that has been the most reliable or your go-to thing in business.
I'll just tell you, the first thing that came to mind is respect is earned and it's perishable. And it's one of those things where, you're the new guy on the team and you have to earn respect. Nobody cares that you're a Green Beret. Everybody else is Green Beret too. And you have to pay your dues and you have to work harder. And the truth of the matter is it's because you know less and you're like a child again. You're more likely to get killed. You're more likely to get someone else killed because you just don't have the experience. So you have to stay humble and you have to put yourself in those kinds of environments where you are humble. Because if you start walking around like you're the king, man, it's really bad for you and it's bad for the people around you because hubris will get people killed. And so, it's the flip side to that is that I had the great fortune to have some great mentors, and some of them, they had different tactics and techniques of mentoring. Some were the ones that I responded the most to were probably the most hostile, right? I mean, that's just my personality. They were the hardest on me. And they're also the ones that I wanted to prove myself to. And so it was one of those things where, I respected what they had done. It's when you choose the kind of place where you go to serve or you go to work, it doesn't matter what your ODA is. Like, you showing up, like there's people on that team that have done great things. They've paid more dues than you have, and you can always learn something from them. And so do that, right? Do that. And it's one of those, you've got to seek that out. You've got to be open to that. And when you get a little bit more along in your career, you've got to find the people that do respond more to you. Because I'm just not the guy that sits down and checks in with someone every single day and does. I'm just kind of not that. I'm more of as a leader, I'm more of a, hey, here's task condition standard, like, impress me. And that's what I responded to as well. And yet some people can thrive with that as a management style, but they need a different kind of a mentor to kind of walk them through some of those stages. And people need combinations of different leadership or mentorship in their lives. But mentorship is kind of a dying art. We don't talk about it enough publicly. And too much of the world has become too privatized in terms of our personal lives. And how do we stay connected with other people? How does the regiment how does our regiment of Green Berets, how do we stay connected with the guys who are coming behind us in a way that is relevant to them? It's not just guys in uniform there, because nobody wants to go talk to the sergeant major, right? I mean, if someone's got a star on their uniform, whatever you do, don't go talk to them, And yet those are the guys with some awesome experience. And so it's just, there's a lot to unpack there. But if you're going to learn something, then, like, you got to earn the respect of the person if you want them to mentor you. And if you're in that position to mentor someone, then take it seriously. You can't expect or demand perfection. You got to kind of help someone along from time to time. And you got to learn when to kind of show a little bit of help someone pick themselves up and not just kick them to the curb. And these are things where people are worth it. It's worth that investment of time when someone makes it a two-way street.
So, no, that's great. And it just reminded me of, I had the opportunity, and I think I've said this every show we've recorded since I was down at Group. It's been a month now, but I had the opportunity to just give a little bit of mentoring to a group of guys that were about to retire or in that window, that 1 to 2 year window. And man, I just love doing that. You just reminded me. I'm okay calling the sergeant major, so I'm going to call the sergeant major and just remind him, hey, I'm only a phone call away, and I've told him that, to come down, and I will do that in any second. Matter of fact, which I'm gonna go into the Green Beret Foundation, because I know that's one of your nonprofits that you support, and as well as I do, and I do that with all my heart, because that regiment, and I want every one of those guys to have more success than I had. And I'm not just talking about on the team, but I'm talking about after they get out, after they've served, and not struggling. And I know you did a little bit of that, because trying not to go down too much into that dark hole that it can be of the, when you take that beret off and you set it up on the shelf and you no longer have that identity, and who do you become? And that, that I am curious now that I've walked down that road. Now I got to turn it into a question for you. So what was it that allowed you to come into this identity that you are now? Entrepreneur, the GORuck guy, the community builder.
I mean, it was really slow. I mean, you have to kind of, and I don't have perfect advice. Certainly, the 3 things that I tell people that are transitioning is number 1, use your post 9/11 GI Bill, right? The American taxpayer is funded your transition like that. And whatever that means to you, what it basically means is don't give up on learning. Don't give up on new skills. Go back, learn something that'll help you transition, right? Number 2 is get a dog. That was instrumental for me. If you don't have one, right, get a dog, right? Dogs are great for routines. It's great for, I don't really have to tell your listener, my best guess, the importance of having a dog. But, when you're by yourself, it's a really dangerous place at times when life's not going well. And just having that, I had Java. It was like Java had to go out. Java had to go for walks, and the Java needed to go for longer walks. And lo and behold, there I am. It got me outside. It got me moving more than I would have otherwise. And the third is find something and work really hard, right? I mean, more than nothing, do something and just get out there and do it. And, that's what we're used to. That's kind of what we're all about. And so it is a difficult thing to transition. I think leaning too much on, your military resume. I mean, there's obviously some transitions that are, if you go straight to contracting or you go straight to wherever, I mean, eventually that dries up and you're going to have to face a piper as well, right? You're going to have to come to terms with your coolest days are behind you. And that's a hard thing to look yourself in the mirror and say, that's my reality. And yet the easiest thing sometimes is to kind of burn that bridge a little bit, to just sort of say, I got to reinvent myself is how I mean to express that. Right. And you got to eat some humble pie. If that means you got to go back to school, you got to learn a new trade. You got to go to somebody at some business. You can start your own too. Somebody at some business and say, I don't really know anything about your business, but here's what I am good at. And, just realize they're going to have to make an investment in you, and that's going to cost them time, effort, energy, and money. And that's not something that Green Berets are necessarily used to after however much time you're in. It's usually, I'm really good at what I do. I'm already highly trained, and you got to go back and start it at a base level, ground zero again. And that's a really tough pill to swallow sometimes. And I think it's wise to just acknowledge that's a tough pill to swallow.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I appreciate those 3 points too. I'm going to bring us back to the business, because one of the things that I always love to know is what's the biggest hurdle. And for you, I'm going to put a caveat on it, because we already talked about a couple of them. What's the biggest hurdle, either coming up or in the past, for your business post positive revenue? Notice I had to caveat you a little bit on that you've either already recovered or you're like, oh crap, that train is coming at me.
What do you mean post positive revenue?
So you already talked about struggling with the, you needed money and how you got out and started building the community. And I from what I hear is, okay, I built the community and now people are buying my product. So now I'm trending towards black, right?
Yeah.
That's what I mean in that. So post the establishing the community, the things are starting to move forward. You're like, yeah, this might actually work.
Yeah. I mean, that happened pretty quickly. I mean, we didn't really have any full-time employees, and our first year we did like $53,000 in revenue, which was 2010 was first revenue after probably hundreds of thousands, including R&D and manufacturing and stuff. And the next year we were at $1.5 million or something like that. So that switch for us, like, it kind of caught fire to by that standard really quickly. Managing that was, you kind of expect that it's going to be like that forever. And so there's this sort of, okay, how do I ride this wave that's working really well? And at the same time kind of say, well, what do I want to be when I grow up? And 2013, we got way over our skis. It led to a large round of layoffs that was very painful and quite embarrassing and humiliating, frankly. And, because it's a lot of great people and it just kind of sucks. And so you don't need to take all this debt. You don't need to do all of these kinds of things. Like, just hustle harder is really what it is. Stay on your skis and just hustle harder. And let the business grow a little bit more organically, and let it happen at you need to figure out what kind of business you have as you're developing it. And so, once we got a little more established, it's like, okay, our basic needs, we've got, the occasional bit of hot chow. We've got, base fortification's pretty good. The lights are on. There's some beer in the fridge for, when the beer light's on. And it's like, okay, well, how do we take this up a notch? And so, right now it's kind of, hey, parallel this keep building a good business, which there's been plenty of rocky bits to the business, but keep building a good business, keep moving forward. And then, we want rucking to be bigger than running. That's our stated big, hairy, audacious goal, right? And so that takes a lot of partners, time, commitment, focus, discipline. You got to sort of stay on message, and you got to fund it. And we haven't taken any outside investment. We haven't done any of that kind of stuff. And so, we're still just hustling hard and really enjoying doing that. And one of the reasons why I'm very reluctant to get into taking money and putting on the gas pedal like that is because there's such to me a pure brand and message for GORuck that our community respects, and the guys that work here are proud to do so. And you start turning your company over to dudes in suits sitting in somewhere, and they start having different ideas on net income optimization and all these kinds of things. And that's a surefire way to start turning your back on the good name that you've made for yourself inside of the community. And so that would be a time when I just would have to walk away. And I could see that playing forward a couple steps out, and that's just not something that's of huge interest to me. So it is kind of, how do you have these big goals and walk your path that is your path that you're supposed to walk, and still kind of, take care of your business day to day. And the balance is a difficult thing to come by, and it's always a precarious thing. When you got it, tomorrow's a new day.
Well, and actually, great job, Jason, because you actually set me up for a segue back to something I had a little while ago. So talk about balance. There's a lot of the time when you talk with entrepreneurs, there's this idea that you can't be too balanced because you won't grow. You want, especially in the early stages of the entrepreneurship journey, you got to be hungry. You got to have some part of that desire to grow and to, be successful. But then the other side of that coin that I really want to talk about is the desperation side. So you'd hear people say you got to be hungry so you can get out there and get to work. And then the other side is you'll hear people, Dad, Mr. Faraji will say this to me all the time, I can smell how desperate they are. I can smell the desperation on them. And so I think it would be interesting for us to kind of balance that, because obviously you don't want to be too desperate to the point where you're making bad decisions. But, there is this point of genuine desperation when you're running a business where it's like, look, I have to make this work. That doesn't mean that you're going to go make a stupid decision or you're going to go do something that's immoral or whatever. So I'll throw that over to you, Jason. How do you kind of balance those two aspects of having that energy, but not getting overly desperate, if you will?
Yeah, if you're desperate, you need to keep that to yourself. I mean, it can fuel the fire, but for me, it's led to things like I just work harder. I have to make more phone calls. I have to send more emails out. I have to follow up with more other people. I have to go back to my Rolodex and find anybody I've ever known, friends of mine, and ask them to buy a rucksack. I've done that. I've done all of that kind of stuff. Like, hey, well, you can be desperate to some people. Let me rephrase that, right? Like old friends, you can say, hey, here's a discount code for 50% off. Like, it would mean a lot to me if you would like test this out, right? Please. It's okay to say please. When you start calling out people, your emergency is not their priority. So you have to kind of weigh, is this a short term? If you need short-term fixes, you better find short-term answers without looking too desperate, because it's a huge turnoff. If you need long-term answers, and you do need those as well, you have to kind of plant those seeds, and they take the time that they take. And in my experience, if something doesn't take a year to come to fruition, it probably isn't worth very much, or it's not done well enough. So, yeah, in the early stages, I mean, life's a little different now. And I recently started a technology company as well to kind of, it's kind of closely aligned with GORuck, but it's a different experience entirely. I have a partner on that with significant experience in true technology. And, I've got 3 kids from the ages of they're 9, 6, and 4, right? And when, the very early stages of GORuck, I had a dog. And which means, there's this idea of, I'm going to sleep 2 hours a night and eat nails that was not me. I would stay up I didn't set an alarm clock for years. It was, my dog's got to get up eventually, but I was up late, and then I would sleep until I woke up, and then my workday started immediately. I'd been dreaming about GORuck and GORuck solutions all night, sure. But it was around the clock, and I had total freedom of, I got to get on a plane and go here. Fine. There's nothing else. There's no school drop-offs. There's no nothing. And so the hunger hasn't subsided at all. In fact, the opportunity has grown bigger to make more of an impact on people's lives. And so with great power comes great responsibility. And I feel the need to kind of express that, but I'm also a lot wiser in terms of how to bring a couple people on and keep the costs low and not make the same mistakes and, do that kind of stuff. So it's absolutely a balance there with GORuck, though, specifically, to go back to the very unvarnished, unromanticized part. I mean, it was just around the clock hustle, and the desperation stuff didn't really work. Like you had to be kind of in charge, and I had to be the one that was just say, in my head, this just isn't going to fail. So I don't know what it's going to be, but it's not going to fail. And if I walk away from it, that's going to be of my own volition. So I will exhaust every single option. And, it's kind of like the guys at Special Forces Assessment and Selection. If you self-select, you're done, right? If the cadre tells you you're done, that's a completely different mental outcome. And so I was never going to be the guy that self-selected. If the world burned me down through silence or through whatever, then, that's your fate, and you accept that and you move on. So Yeah. Did I answer your question?
You really did. I think that's great. You know, the main takeaway I got from that is you can be desperate to some people, because I love that balance, because I've been there as an entrepreneur too, where it's like, okay, hey, I've got 2 weeks left on my runway. Like, this has to happen now, but you can't carry that into meetings. You can't carry that to your team. I love how you separated those two.
So Jason,
Cool.
what's next? What's next? You touched a little bit on the technology thing. I mean, if you want to tell us more about that, or what's next for GORuck?
Yeah. So the technology company is a spin-off of GORuck, really. I mean, the first problem that we're solving is I believe in a world where people are more physically and socially active. You come together in the real world, you do stuff outside. You know, the way that I found so fulfilling was you gave a shit about the people around you, like really gave a shit. And so, you know, so much of the world has gone pushed to virtual, and everything is so private all the time. And, you know, it's killing us, literally. It's killing us in a sea of unhappiness and depression and loneliness and anxiety and all that stuff. And so, you know, we have 500 GORuck clubs. That was a good start. And in this kind of technology side, it was, hey, how do we empower them to invite more people to their meetups, their workouts, to build that community? Technology is a tool, right? Humans are more important than hardware. Technology is a tool. So let them force multiply their people. And so we started a company called Sandlot Technology, which is agnostic to the type of activity. So rucking, or doing sandbag training, or jogging, or running, or high intensity interval training, or boot camp, or whatever. It's about bringing people together. And sometimes those are led by trainers, sometimes they're not, but it's a real world maps or integrated fitness, like geospatial fitness app, if you want to call it that. And it starts with, hey, let's meet up with other people. It doesn't start with, here's your perfect training plan. Because the world out there, and guys that are wearing the uniform, you know, or our Green Berets that are listening to this, like, oh, you know, you already know this, man, but lots of people don't. Hey, you need to go link up with your buddies. That's really important. And too many people and kids aren't doing that these days. So, and we got a big fitness festival coming to Jacksonville next year, April 22nd to the 24th, called Sandlot Jacks. And that's just putting all these different fitness activities with global thought leaders and fitness trainers, and scavenger hunts all around town, and live music and cold beers and stuff like that. And there's an RV, you know, camping, glamping, you know, area as well, and let people come here to sunshiny Florida and have a great time outside with each other. And that's kind of bringing the GORuck way of life, which is the Sandlot and Sandlot Jack's way of life as well. So, you know, this is the way of life that I believe in, and this is kind of the way of life that I'm really motivated to fight for. Whatever the results or the outcomes are, I believe in this path, and I'm walking it.
That's awesome. What's the date on that, Jason? Do you know it off the top of you?
It's April 22nd to the 24th in Jacksonville, Florida, which is, you know, it's in the northeastern coast of Florida. So it's a great place. It's you know, downtown is right on the St. Johns River, you know, 15 miles to the east where I am, where GORuck headquarters is. We're on the beaches. We've got a barrier island out here, and, you know, it's awesome. So, you know, more people need to know what's up in Jacksonville as well. It's kind of the capital of freedom in the universe right now. It's a great place to be active and outside, and, you know, the world needs more of that.
That's awesome, man. That's great. And yeah, we'll make sure for listeners that'll be in the show notes so that you can follow up and hopefully catch everybody down in Jacksonville in April next year. So that'll be a lot of fun. Jason, this has been great, man. I had a lot of fun. Got a lot of good nuggets to pass on to folks, and just some great stories too about life and business, and doing what's important and what's right instead of just trying to turn a dollar. So that always love those kind of stories. So speaking of which, so for me, going to our What'd You Learn, you know, I'm going to let you go, Camden. Let Camden go first.
Well,
because I
caught me off guard.
I suckered him in. I led him forward. He thought I was going to go, and he's like, "Oh, cool. So I can look at my notes." No, you're going first.
Oh, I
Lead
was
us
ready
off.
to go. I was ready. Jason, you dropped this one a while ago, and I'm rephrasing it. But when we talk about being a leader, being a figurehead, being the face of the business, all that kind of stuff, the fact is someone's got to go out there and shake hands and kiss babies and do all that kind of stuff. But if you carry that type of mentality into your team, it's going to be toxic for that environment. So that was my big takeaway today.
Oh, for me, it's it is the ground root of why Green Berets exist, and the fact that it's my foot stomper. I say every time I talk to guys, is you've got all the knowledge, you just got to change the culture and how you present it, and that's treat your clients and your community that you build as a partner force, and that's your force multiplier for your business. And if you're not part of that, not using that skill set, I mean, whether you're in the mountains in Afghanistan, the mountains in Vietnam, or wow, why are these always mountains? Northern Iraq, the mountains with the Kurds in Iraq. I mean, seems to be a lot of mountains happening here, but it's creating that partner force, and you can do that same thing in your business. So, Jason, what'd you learn?
You guys pushed me. I always enjoy these kinds of conversations because I learned this idea of going back to the fundamentals and the basics. And so anytime I check in, especially with guys who understand the kind of special forces way of life, it's just in my head, I'm just processing more of, okay, well, how can I go back and brilliance in the basics even more? And it's not like, you don't need to learn how to shoot between your legs on the move, jumping out of a helicopter, right? It's like brilliance in the basics, and keep doing that. And it's an adaptive world every single day. And so you've got to adapt to it. And tomorrow's a new day. And I guess the final takeaway to kind of lesson that I've learned, good reminder, is it's great that you served and that you were a Green Beret. At some point, nobody gives a shit, right? It's about what you do and how you lead and how you treat people moving forward. Like, just remember that. People will say thank you for your service, and they will honor you for what you did. And it's even more if you wore the Green Beret, and that's great. But nobody gives a shit at some point. Like, they've got their own livelihood. They've got their own struggles. They've got their own happiness and families and, hopes and wishes and wants and dreams to contend with. And you need to be part of a better solution for them in order to get them on your team and operating well, or to get them part of your partner force, your community, or whatever that case may be. And so there's really just so much value in relearning what we already know.
That's great. That's great. And Jason, as we wrap up, so how do folks get in touch with you, find GORuck, whatever the next event and those things?
Yeah, we're on all social stuff at GORuck, and I'm Jason J. McCarthy on Instagram, which I check not religiously, but somewhat frequently. And, you can email us, team@GORuck, or check us out at GORuck.com, all that kind of jazz. And the fitness festival next year is sandlotjacks.com.
That's great. That's great, man. I appreciate your time today. It's been a lot of fun. Thanks for sharing.
Much respect, man. And if anything ever comes up, anything I can do to support the regiment, I'm always a phone call and email away.
That's great, man. I assume that, but it's always good to hear that. Camden, run us out.
All right. Thank you all for listening to today's show. Special thanks to our guest, Jason McCarthy, and our sponsor, Tribe and Purpose. Find your tribe, find your purpose. You can check out recent episodes of The Cam and Otis Show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts, and check out a full archive at thecamandotisshow.buzzsprout.com. The Cam and Otis Show is on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Thanks again, and we'll see y'all next week.